Hello everyone. Tonight we slip into the silence of a galaxy where survival is little more than a cruel bet. You are marked, not by chance, not by mistake, but because Chaos Space Marines have decided that you are worth the chase. You probably won't survive this. That's not me being dramatic, that's just the arithmetic of Warhammer 40K. The odds, slimmer than a ration pack left open in a hadlock full of hungry underage IVRS. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe. But only if you truly enjoy what I'm doing here. And while you're at it, tell me your location and your local time in the comments. I'll be curious to see where you're hiding when the lights go out. And so the wheel of fate turns again. Sacrifice has been made. The first key has turned, and mankind takes one step closer to the light of the throne. This is not the end. This is only the beginning. The first thing you feel isn't sound or sight. It's weight. The weight of knowing you've been chosen as prey. In the vast Imperium, death usually comes in waves of artillery, bombardment, starvation. But here, it is personal. Chaos Space Marines don't just kill. They hunt. Lore masters still debate whether the twisted psychology of these traitors is a lingering echo of their Astartes training, or if the warp itself warps their predatory instincts. Either way, you are now their quarry. You sense it before you understand it. The quiet round you is too perfect. No distant servitors grinding. No clatter of workers. No vox chatter bleeding through from a nearby patrol. The silence presses down, and your skin prickles. You remember old warnings. When the air turns heavy and the shadows stretch wrong, it means they've already set their eyes on you. Historians still argue whether the first documented chaos hunt came during the Great Crusade or after the Horus Heresy. Records are conflicting. Some accounts speak of Night Lords using terror tactics even before their fall, while others insist true hunts began when warbands fractured and needed to feed their cruelty in smaller, bloodier spectacles. Whatever the truth, you're walking proof that the practice endures. A low vibration reaches your feet. It feels like distant machinery, but you know better. That is ceramite boots striking ferrocrete. The sound is faint, filtered by distance, but each step vibrates like a drumbeat carried through your bones. Chaos Space Marines are not subtle, and they don't need to be. Their confidence is the cage, and you're inside it. You wonder why it's natural. Maybe you saw something you shouldn't have. Maybe you were in the wrong place, wrong shift, wrong sector, or maybe, just maybe, it's because you mean nothing at all. That's the cruelest truth about chaos hunts. They often choose prey for no reason beyond the thrill. If you're hoping for some special meaning, some hidden value in your suffering, you'll be disappointed. You'll just meet with a pulse. The corridors ahead look the same as always, but your mind begins to notice differences. Scrolls on the walls that weren't there yesterday. Chalky symbols that curve into spirals. Some with smears of what you pray is only paint. You blink, and for a moment the symbols seem to shift, like they're rearranging themselves just out of sight. You rub your eyes. Fatigue. Maybe. Warp corruption. More likely. Here's a little trivia for you. Many Imperial civilians believe that if you scratch out a chaos rune, the Marines hunting you will lose. Interest, superstition, of course. Scratching the symbol only makes it worse. Some warbands even lay false runes to bait frightened prey into marking themselves, turning them into living beacons for the hunt. You've probably just walked past 3 already. Congratulations, the first sound you really register is laughter. Not loud, not joyful, but distant and broken, like vox static mixed with a growl. It echoes in the wrong direction, somewhere behind, somewhere to the left, somewhere above. It doesn't matter where. It means they want you to know they're near. Chaos Marines don't chasten. Silence. They announce themselves, daring you to run. Because fear makes the taste of the hunt sharper. You try to calculate your options, run forward into the unknown, hide in one of the side passages, pretend to be dead. Each feels useless. You've heard stories about others. The runner always gets cornered. The hider always gets smoked out. The pretender, let's just say bowl to shells. Don't care if you're faking dot, and so you walk. Slow at first, then faster. Your heartbeat quickens. Every sound your boots, your breath, the creak of metal above feels amplified. Paranoia spreads like fire in your chest. You tell yourself to stay calm, but your hands are already trembling. You think about the Emperor. You whisper half-remembered catechisms under your breath, words you never bothered with before. Now, each syllable tastes like rust, but feels like the only shield left. Lore masters still debate whether prayers actually repel chaos. Some claim faith radiates a psychic barrier that demons cannot stand against. Others argue that belief is only psychological comfort. In this moment, you don't care. You cling to words because they're all you have behind you. Something shifts, a heavy scrape against ferrite, followed by a pause. They are closer now. They want you to know. You glance down at your hand. It's shaking so badly that if you were holding a lascan, the shot would go wide. You think about grabbing a weapon anyway, but then you realize what you'll be up against. Warriors in armor older than your entire bloodline. What by gods that laugh at physics? You with a lascan is like a rat with a toothpick. Funny in concept, but not in execution. And here's the joke you don't want. Chaos Marines don't need to eat. Yet some of them still do, just because it amuses them. So if you're wondering what happens if they catch you, yes, the worst stories are probably true. You breathe in, steadying yourself. But the air feels thick now. It clings to your lungs, hot and sour. Warp taint always follows them. It doesn't choke you, not yet. But you know it will get worse. Some survivors describe it as inhaling smoke from a burnt-out shrine mixed with the stench of spoiled meat. You are only at the start, and already the taste is creeping in. You keep moving, because stopping isn't an option anymore. The hunt has begun, and whether it ends in hours or minutes, you are already theirs. The first signs of pursuit are never what you expect. You imagine boring chainswords and bolt-of-fire tearing walls apart. But the truth is quieter and more deliberate. Chaos Space Marines begin with whispers, not words you can understand, more like sounds slithering into your thoughts. You glance around. But there's no source. The noise is both near and far, rising and fading like a broken Vox transmission. Your instincts tell you what your mind refuses to admit. They are marking you, softening you with dread before the real chase begins. Lore masters still debate whether these auditory tricks are deliberate psychological warfare or natural bleed over from the warp. Some say certain warbands trained to project their menace across Vox frequencies, saturating the air with corrupted signals. Others claim the warp simply leaks through their presence, warping sound as much as it warps flesh. Either way, the effect is the same. You can't trust your ears anymore. At first, you dismiss the odd shapes in your periphery as tricks of the light. But they linger. A shadow stretches too long against the corridor wall. A reflection in a shattered panel stares back with eyes that aren't yours. A doorway you just passed now seems to pulse like it's breathing. You blink, rub your face, try to anchor yourself with small rituals, count steps, tap a rhythm, hum an old work song. But the sense of wrongness grows heavier. Historians still argue whether the Night Lords invented this style of intimidation or if it was common among traitor legions. Some point to records of Nostromo, where citizens were conditioned to fear every dark corner. The same techniques, magnified by warp corruption, spread across Chaos warbands after the heresy. Regardless of origin, the method works. You're already unraveling under it. You stop. Your hand brushes against a bulkhead. It feels warm, as if blood is pumping through it. You snatch your hand back and shake your head. Maybe it's fatigue. Maybe it's them. You remember a rumor. Some hunted victims described walls that seemed alive, shifting when no one else looked. Superstition, perhaps. But right now superstition feels like prophecy. A sound pulls you from your thoughts, metal clanging in the distance. At first, you hope it's workers, maybe a patrol. But the pattern is wrong. It isn't the rhythm of boots marching or servitors hauling cargo. It's deliberate. One step. Pause. Another step. Pause. They are moving slowly. Savoring the moment. You realize you stopped breathing. Here's a bit of trivia most people never hear. Some chaos warbands use small, corrupted servo skulls as hunting beacons. They drift ahead, their lenses flickering with warp light, transmitting your location back to the Marines. People who've seen them up close describe them as humming, twitching, and sometimes whispering your own name. So if you feel watched even when the corridor is empty, chances are you are. You pass a shrine alcove. Once, it held a statue of the Emperor. Now it's defaced. Someone or something has hacked the face away and smeared ichor across the plinth. You hesitate, tempted to kneel, to pray for protection, but Phil locks you in place. The thought that they might be watching, laughing at your display, makes you move again. The air temperature drops. Cold radiates off the walls, prickling your skin. You see frost forming where there shouldn't be any. It spreads like veins across the bulkheads, curling into unnatural patterns. That's not weather, and it's not climate control. It's a sign the warp is pushing into real space. The hunters are close enough to twist the environment around you. Another sound reaches you, this time from above. You glance up and spot movement through the grates of a service tunnel. For a split second, you see a shadow pass overhead, huge and deliberate. It's gone before you can focus, but the echo remains in your bones. They aren't just behind you, they're circling. Lore masters still debate whether this circling tactic is instinctual or coordinated. Some argue that warbands like the Alpha Legion perfected it, using psychological pressure to drive prey into traps. Others counter that Chaos Marines simply enjoy playing with victims, like predators dragging out the kill. You, of course, don't get the luxury of academic debate. You just keep moving. Forced by the dread of being boxed in, you hear laughter again, closer this time. It comes from multiple directions, overlapping and jagged. One voice is deep and guttural, another high and rasping. They are not speaking in low Gothic, not in any tongue you recognize, but you feel the meaning in your gut. Amusement, hunger, inevitability. You try to think rationally. Where can you go? Which route leads to safety? But every path seems compromised. Every shadow feels alive. You consider doubling back, but the thought of retracing your steps into their reach makes your stomach twist. Running forward seems just as hopeless, but it's the only direction left. Here's the joke of the night. You thought you lived in a city, but right now it feels like a maze built just for them. Every street corner, every service duct, every stairwell perfect angles for ambush. You realize with bitter amusement that this hunt has probably been staged long before you even knew it started. Your body reacts before your mind does. Muscles twitch, heart races, sweat dampens your collar. The realization sinks in, you're no longer just moving because you want to. You're being driven, herded, like livestock pushed towards slaughter. The hunters, they're not even rushing. They don't have to. They know you'll exhaust yourself long before they do. A final sound seals it. A metallic thud, deliberate and heavy, echoing from a passageway ahead. They're there too. You're trapped in the middle, prey caught in a net you can't even see. The sound of power armor is unmistakable once you've heard it. Heavy, deliberate, resonant like industrial machinery that somehow grew a heartbeat. At first, You convince yourself it's distant. That may be a patrol of loyalists. A starts has arrived. Or that servitors are shifting cargo in the next sector. But the rhythm is wrong. It's too uneven, too intentional. Each step is placed like punctuation, announcing, "We are here, and you are nothing." Lore masters still debate whether the acoustic signature of chaos armor has changed since the heresy. Some say corruption warps the ceramite, giving it that groaning, metallic resonance, almost like the armor itself is alive. Others argue that what you're hearing is your own perception bending under warp influence, making ordinary sounds feel heavier, more suffocating. Either way, when you hear the tread, it carves through your nerves like a blade. You freeze, pressing yourself into the cold bulkhead. The vibration carries through the wall, up your arm, into your chest. It feels as though your heart is trying to match the rhythm of the steps. You count them 4, 5, 6, and then silence. They've stopped, which is worse. Hearing them approach, or not knowing where they've paused. Historians still argue whether bolters were ever intended for intimidation as much as for killing. The recoil crack, the explosive. Detonation inside the target. The spray of shards, it's not just efficient. It's terrifying. Chaos Marines know this. They fire single shots down corridors not to hit you, but to remind you that you're already dead, and you're only running on borrowed time. The first bolt round slams into a wall to corridors away. The detonation shakes dust from the ceiling. You hear the echoing clatter of shell fragments bouncing across the ferrocrete. The second round lands closer. They're not aiming for you yet. They're steering you, marking the limits of your cage. Then comes the laughter, filtered through broken vox units. It's mechanical and animal at once, filled with distortion. You can't even tell if it's a voice or a machine glitch. But the intent carries. They're laughing because they know you heard. They're laughing because you still think you can flee. You stumble forward, feet splashing through a thin film of water pooled along the corridor floor. The ripples betray your direction. But you don't have time to care. Your ears ring from the echoes of the detonations. You strain to hear above the pounding of your own blood, and then, clear as a funeral bell, the sound comes again. Steps, closer now. Here's a little trivia. Some warbands deliberately modify their armor to exaggerate the noise, spikes dragging along walls, chains rattling with every movement, servo motors left unoiled so they screech. The Iron Warriors are said to amplify this to extremes, turning their very presence into psychological warfare. Silence could kill faster, but noise kills better, because it breaks the mind before the body. A sudden metallic crash erupts to your right. A door blown inward, hinges screaming. You dart left. The choice instinctive, not tactical. Your breath catches as you hear Vox static burst into a guttural chant. The words mean nothing to you, but the cadence feels ritualistic, as though each syllable is a prayer to keep you running until your legs give out. Lore masters still debate whether the chants are worship or mockery. Some argue the Marines are invoking their dark patrons with every syllable. Others believe they simply mimic ecclesiarchy rites as a form of psychological torment. Both are likely true to you. It doesn't matter, the sound is another weight pressing down on your resolve. You slide round a corner, nearly losing your footing. A head lies along, dim corridor lined with fractured pipes. Steam hisses from ruptures, clouding the air. The hiss blends with the echo of steps behind you, making it impossible to track distance. You push forward anyway, lungs burning, the taste of rust thick on your tongue. Suddenly, a bold round screams overhead, tearing into the far wall. Shrapnel sprays across the corridor. You drop, arms over your head, is ringing from the blast. When the smoke clears, you glance up to see the wall split open, glowing faintly from the detonation's heat. They could have aimed at you. They didn't. That was punctuation again. A period at the end of a sentence you weren't supposed to finish. Here's the joke. You've never been more aware of your own boots. Every step feels clumsy, every scuff deafening. You try to land softly, to move faster, but all you can hear is the clatter of your own panic. In your mind, you imagine them listening, amused, marking every sound you make like a predator cataloguing the squeaks of prey. A shadow flickers at the end of the corridor for a heartbeat. You swear you see the outline of horns, the bulk of a towering figure framed by the haze. But then it's gone, swallowed by steam. Maybe it was real. Maybe it wasn't. Both options are equally horrifying. Historians still argue about how much of the intimidation is calculated and how much is simply the byproduct of corruption. Do the Marines think through every step of this? Or is the hunt just instinct, warped by centuries of servitude to chaos, to you? It doesn't matter. The effect is the same. You feel like a mouse in a maze built by gods who hate you. The steps start again, closer, quicker. You break into a run, your body screaming for oxygen, your thoughts fracturing into half-formed prayers. The air tastes like oil and ozone, every breath a cough. Your lungs ache, your legs stumble, but you keep moving because you can't stop. You hear a chain rattling somewhere behind you. Not fast, not urgent, just steady, and then silence. You stop too, chest heaving, sweat dripping into your eyes. The silence is worse than the noise. You realize they're letting you under, letting you decide whether to move or wait. The sound of power armor isn't just presence, it's absence, too. You understand now. They can break you with noise, and they can break you with quiet. Either way, the hunt goes on, the corruption in. The air is subtle at first. You think it's just the smell of coolant leaks or bad ventilation. But then it deepens, the air grows thick, sticky almost, clinging to your lungs with every breath. You cough, but it doesn't help. The taste is metallic, sharp, like biting down on a copper corn. It lingers on your tongue, reminding you that this isn't ordinary atmosphere. It's warp taint, leaking in through the cracks opened by the hunters. Lore masters still debate whether Chaos Marines carry this corruption with them, or if the warp simply follows wherever they go. Some argue there. Armor and weapons act as anchors for the Imperium, bleeding poison into real space. Others believe the corruption is psychological, your senses bending under terror, tricking you into feeling an environment that doesn't really exist. Neither answer helps when every breath feels like swallowing ash. Your vision begins to blur at the edges. The walls ripple, bending as though they've been heated by an invisible flame. You blink, but the distortion doesn't fade. A symbol etched into the bulkhead seems to crawl under your gaze, twisting into new shapes each time you glance back. You know better than to stare. Superstition spread across hive cities for a reason. Too much attention to a warp rune, and you might find it staring back. Historians still argue whether mortals can truly resist warp exposure without psychic discipline. Some cases suggest that ordinary humans have endured days of corruption simply by clinging to their faith. Others insist those survivors must have carried traces of psychic potential, however small. You wonder which category you fall into. Deep down, you already know the answer. You're not special. You're just prey. The sound of your breath changes. It rasps now, harsh and uneven. You realize you're panting harder than you thought. Sweat drips down your back. But the air around you feels cold. The contradiction unsettles you more than the chill itself. You rub your arms, trying to shake it off. But the sensation persists. Your body is hot. The world is freezing. Here's a piece of trivia most don't want to hear. Certain chaos. War bands deliberately spread chemical agents or spore clouds during hunts. These aren't meant to kill outright. Instead, they disorient prey, making them hallucinate, stumble, or panic. What is? The Death Guard perfected this practice. but plenty of others copied it. So, if the air feels wrong, it's not your imagination. It's part of the game. A faint hum reaches your ears. It's low, almost imperceptible. Like machinery far away. You stop, straining to hear. The hum rises, dipping in and out, until it sounds like chanting carried through static. You can't make out the words, but your stomach twists at the rhythm. It feels like the air itself is joining in, vibrating with each syllable. You shake your head, press your palms against your ears, but the sound burrows deeper, crawling into your skull. Lore masters still debate whether this phenomenon is the warp itself singing or if it's a deliberate tactic by the Marines. Either way, you can't unhear it. The hum stays, threading through your thoughts, growing louder with every breath. You stumble forward, trying to outrun a sound you can't escape. The corridor bends, and you nearly collide with a body. At first, you think it's another survivor. Relief surges until you see the state of them. Their skin is grey, eyes glassy, mouth open in a silent scream. No wounds, no blood, just drained. You recall. Gagging, bile rising in your throat. Warp corruption doesn't always leave marks you can explain. Sometimes it just empties a person, turning them into a husk. You cover your mouth, but the stench still hits you. Not rot, not decay, but something sharper. Ozone mixed with vinegar, with a sour tang that makes your teeth ache. You stumble back, boots scraping against the floor, and force yourself to keep moving. Looking too long will only freeze you in place, and the hunters want you frozen. Another sound cuts through the hiss of pipes above. A cloud of vapor bursts downward, enveloping you in damp mist. You cough violently, hacking until your ribs ache. The taste is foul, thick, clinging. Your chest feels heavier, your arms weaker. You stagger, leaning against the wall, praying you don't collapse. If you fall here, you won't get up again. Here's the joke. You once thought survival meant food, water, and shelter. Now it means air, just air. A basic human need twisted into a weapon. You laugh, short and bitter, but it comes out as another cough. The sound echoes far too loudly. Somewhere behind you, armored boots answer. Lore masters still debate whether Chaos Space Marines enjoy drawing out their hunts, or if they're simply bound by ritual. Some warbands are known to end things quickly. World leaders, for example, rarely waste time. But others, like the Night Lords, take pleasure in extending the terror. Judging by the state of the air around you, you've drawn the short lot. They want you eat before they even touch you. The mist clears just enough for you to see ahead. The corridor splits. Left leads into darkness so thick your eyes refuse to penetrate it. Right leads toward flickering light, cold and blue, pulsing like a dying lung globe. Neither feels safe, but you can't stay here, choking on warp-tainted breath. You force your legs to move. Your lungs burn with every inhale. Your throat raw. Each step feels heavier than the last. You think of the husk you passed, wondering if you'll look the same in minutes. The image clings to your mind, and no matter how hard you shake your head, it won't fade. And then, faint and sudden, a whisper brushes your ear. It's not a voice you recognize, not male or female, just a sound, soft and intimate. Closer. You spin, eyes wide. But the corridor behind you is empty, except for the smell. Hot, sour, undeniable. The corruption in the air is no longer a warning. It's a promise. The first kill doesn't come with ceremony. It happens suddenly, brutally, and without hesitation. You don't even see it at first. You hear it. A muffled scream, sharp and high, cut short with a sound like metal shearing through flesh. Your head jerks toward the noise, instincts screaming at you to run. But your legs freeze. You wait for the echo to fade. But it doesn't. It lingers in your skull, replaying itself, reminding you that someone else was just taken so you could keep breathing a little longer. Lore masters still debate whether Chaos Marines kill their first victim as a tactical choice or as ritual. Sacrifice. Some argue that the first kill is meant to break the spirit of everyone else, scattering prey and driving them into mistakes. Others insist it is a gift to their dark gods, an offering of blood to sanctify the hunt. Whatever the reason, you now know you are not imagining things. The hunt is real, and it has already claimed its first life. You move toward the sound, not because you want to, but because curiosity drags you. Part of you hopes it was quick, that maybe you'll find nothing but a body. The other part of you dreads what you'll see. You round a corner, and find both halves of your suspicion confirmed. The victim lies against the wall, crumpled, armor cracked open like a tin can. Their torso is gone, reduced to shreds of bone and red pulp. A bolt around did this. You don't need training to know. The explosion inside the body has left nothing intact. You stare, frozen, until your stomach clenches and bile rises. You turn aside. Vomit, the stench of acid mixing with the iron tang of blood in the air. Historians still argue whether the bolter was designed purely for war or for spectacle. Its mass reactive rounds don't just kill the obliterate. To mortals, the effect is more terror than tactics. Alaskan burns a hole. A bolter leaves nothing recognizable. Looking at this corpse, you realize that every future kill will look the same. You hear footsteps again. Heavy, deliberate, closing in. Panic surges, and you stumble back from the body. Your boots slip on blood, and you nearly fall. You catch yourself against the wall, smearing red across your hands, your arms. The stench clings. You wipe your palms against your clothes, but the stain doesn't fade. Now you carry a mark of the kill with you, whether you want it or not. Here's a bit of trivia whispered among hive gangs. Some believe touching the blood of a Chaos Marine's victim curses you, that their gods see the mark and take interest. Most call it superstition, but looking at your hands now, it feels less like a joke and more like prophecy. You stagger away, legs trembling. The corridor ahead bends downward, a ramp leading into the lower levels. You hesitate, but the footsteps behind push you forward. You descend, each step echoing louder than the last. The air grows damper, thicker, filled with the sour scent of mildew and rust. Lore masters still debate whether the first kill is meant to be seen or simply heard. Some warbands leave bodies in plain sight, trophies meant to break morale. Others drag corpses away, leaving only silence and absence to haunt survivors. You weren't given the luxury of absence. You saw the body. You smelled it. You carry it now. The ramp ends in a wide chamber, once used for storage. Crates are scattered, toppled in disarray. You duck behind one, pressing your back against the wood. Your heart pounds so loudly you're sure it will give you away. You strain to listen, but the echoes here are worse. Every drip of water, every groan of metal, every shuffle of your boots amplifies into thunder. And then you hear it, a wet tearing sound, deliberate and slow. You peek over the crate, just for a moment. That's when you see them. A Chaos Marine, hulking and immense, crouches over another victim. Their gauntleted hand digs into the corpse's chest, pulling free what remains of ribs and tissue. You gag, stifle a sound, force yourself back behind cover. Your mind races. Why are they doing this? They don't need to eat. They don't need trophies. Historians still argue about this behavior. Some suggest it's ritual cannibalism, meant to honor the gods with every bite. Others say it's cruelty. Nothing more. The sheer delight of desecration. Whichever it is, you now understand why survivors rarely describe what they saw. Words can't capture the rawness of the sight. You clutch your chest, trying to steady your breath. Every exhale feels like a beacon. You pray silently that they won't notice, that they'll be too distracted with their prize. But prayers here feel like whispers into a void that only mocks you. Here's the joke. You used to think the worst part of dying was the pain. Now you realize it's the waiting, watching others go before you, knowing your turn is coming, but not knowing when. That's the cruelty they let you witness, let you carry the weight of someone else's last moments. The tearing stops. Silence fills the chamber. You don't move. You don't breathe. A heavy footstep echoes, then another. They're walking now, away from the body, deeper into the shadows. You wait, counting each step until it fades. Only then do you let out the breath you've been holding. But the image lingers, the body, the blood, the sound. The first kill is never just theirs, it's yours, too. A wound in your mind that won't heal. And now you know, beyond doubt, that the hunt won't stop until they've taken you the same way. The hunt changes after the first kill. Before, it was paranoia, shadows, and sounds you might have imagined. Now it's truth, and Chaos Marines never leave the truth clean. They shape it into a weapon. You begin to notice patterns in their movements. They aren't chasing in a straight line. They're circling, pressing, pushing you without words. The air grows heavier in the directions they want you to avoid. Sounds rise where they want you to flee. They're herding you like cattle toward a slaughterhouse you can't see yet. Some scholars argue that this is instinct, that millennia of war have taught Chaos Marines how to trap prey as naturally as wolves. Others believe it's deliberate cruelty playing with mortals the way a cat toys with a mouse. The effect is the same. You move not by choice, but by design. You enter a narrow corridor, and it feels wrong immediately. To quiet, to clean, the floor is free of debris. As if someone cleared it, you slow your steps. But it's too late. A sudden snap echoes from above. Chains rattle. A heavy weight slams down. A body swings before you, suspended from the ceiling. It's one of the others who tried to run, limbs bound, chest torn open, head tilted unnaturally back. The eyes are gone. In their place, candles burn, wax melting down into the sockets. The corpse creaks gently with each sway, a grotesque lantern. You stumble backward, colliding with the wall. Your heart hammers. But this isn't a random trophy. It's a signpost, a marker meant to tell you exactly where you are, within their game. Here's the horror of it: Chaos Marines don't need traps to kill you. They could crush you instantly. But they set these snares because fear's more valuable than blood. The longer you run, the more despair you feel, the greater the offering to their gods. You push forward, past the corpse lantern. Every step feels heavier. The smell of burned flesh follows you, clinging to your skin, sinking into your lungs. You reach a junction, to paths splitting left and right. You pause, unsure. That's when you hear it scraping metal behind you. The swing of chains again. They're coming. You choose left, sprinting into the dark. The floor tilts downward, leading into a chamber littered with rubble. For a moment, relief. You think you've found cover. Then your foot strikes something soft. You glance down. Not rubble. Bodies, dozens, piled together, stripped of armor, marked with runes carved into the flesh. Some are fresh, blood still wet and glistening. Others are nothing but husks, dried and cracked. You gag, stepping back. But your boot slips. You fall, landing against cold skin. Historians debate whether such piles are offerings or warnings. Some claim they're sacrifices to Khorne, blood for the blood god. Others say they're left from mortals like you, a message that resistance is useless, whatever the meaning. The effect is absolute. You no longer think of escape. You think only of survival. The sound of bolter fire-ups above, Muffled but close, you flinch, expecting the next shot to tear through you. Instead, silence follows, silence so deep it presses against your ears. You crawl free of the corpses, trembling, your body shaking uncontrollably. Your hands are slick, your clothes stained. You can't tell where their blood ends and yours begins. Hear something veterans whisper in the underhives. Chaos Marines don't chase you forever. They trap you until you break yourself. Until your mind collapses before your body does. Looking at your shaking hands now, you wonder how much longer until you're already dead. Walking only out of habit, you move again, staggering into another corridor. This one is lined with broken statues, effigies of saints shattered and defiled, heads replaced with spikes, wings twisted into claws, mouths stuffed with bones, the messages. Clear, faith means nothing here, and that's when you hear it, the laugh. Deep, mechanical, distorted by vox filters, but unmistakable. Not a laugh of joy, a laugh of certainty. They've seen you. They know where you are, and they're enjoying the game. You run, but it feels pointless. Every turn, every passage, every shadow, it all leads where they want you to go. The traps are not cages. They are reminders. You're not escaping. You're dancing. They are playing the music. The lore masters argue endlessly whether Chaos Marines hunt for ritual, for survival, or for pleasure tonight. You learn the truth. It's all three. Ritual gives it meaning. Survival keeps it going. Pleasure makes it endless. And as you stumble through the maze they've built round you, you understand the cruelest trap of all, the hope that maybe, somehow, you can outlast them. Faith is a fragile thing when Chaos Space Marines are near. You carry it with you like a charm, whispering prayers, clutching symbols of the Emperor. But when they hunt, they don't just kill, they desecrate. They laugh at belief, tear it apart, and make you watch. The first shrine you stumble upon looks untouched. From a distance, a simple alcove carved into the wall. Candles still burning, the aquila shining in gold leaf. For a brief moment, relief washes over you. You think, maybe this place has been spared. Maybe the Emperor still watches. Then you step closer. The candles burn with green flame, thick smoke curling into shapes that claw at your eyes. The aquila isn't gold, it's bone, a spine, split into and pinned against the wall. Vertebrae stacked like teeth. The skull of a guardsman rests where the eagle's head should be. Lore masters still debate whether Chaos Marines mock faith for their own amusement or as part of a deeper ritual. Some argue it's a form of worship twisted toward their gods, that every defiled shrine feeds the warp. Others claim it's pure cruelty, designed to strip you of hope before they take your life. Both arguments fit what you see before you. You don't linger. You can't. But the image stays in your mind, sharper than any blade. Further ahead, you find bodies ranged in parody of devotion, kneeling, hands clasped, heads bowed in prayer but every throat cut, blood pooled at their knees, a macabre congregation that never finishes its hymn. You whisper a prayer yourself, quietly, hoping the Emperor hears you even here, but the words stick in your throat. They feel small, almost childish, compared to the weight of the mockery around you. His sound breaks your thoughts. Heavy boots on stone. You press yourself against the wall, holding your breath. They're close. You don't see them yet, but you feel them. The air vibrates with each step, and then the voice, deep, distorted, echoing through the corridor. Where is your god now? It's not just a taunt. It's a statement, a fact they want you to swallow. Historians still argue whether Chaos Marines truly believe in their dark gods, or if belief itself is only a tool for power. But when you hear their laughter, see their rituals, and watch them twist, the Emperor's light into something foul, you can't deny that faith in a faith is a weapon, and tonight, That weapon isn't yours. You push deeper into the ruins, but everywhere you turn, the signs multiply, crosses made from bones, hymnals were written in blood, a saint's statue hollowed out, its chest filled with writhing worms that spill to the floor when you pass. You realize something chilling. They're not just mocking faith. They're testing yours. Every shrine, every twisted relic is designed to break your resolve. They don't want you to die screaming. They want you to die doubting. One piece of trivia from ancient records. During the Long War, it was said that word-bearers would capture entire chapels, not to burn them, but to rewrite, then turning every verse, every carving, into oaths to chaos. Sometimes they left them standing, waiting for the faithful to stumble inside and lose themselves, looking round you now. You wonder if this is what you're walking through. Your legs shake as you kneel before another ruin of a shrine. The Emperor's name has been scratched out, replaced with crude runes that pulse, faintly in the dark. You know if you stare too long, the marks will shift, trying to draw you in. You close your eyes, whisper one last prayer, and force yourself to rise. But faith feels thin now. Like Peeper in the rain, every breath you take, you ask yourself, does he hear you, or is it only silence beyond the void? Behind you, the laugh comes again. Closer this time. They know you're doubting. They can smell it. You run, clutching your symbol tighter, though you no longer know if you believe in it. And that's how Chaos Marines win long before the kill. They don't just hunt your body, they hunt your faith. And when that faith falters, the kill is already done. Bolter fire doesn't sound like the Laskans you grew up hearing. Alaskan snaps, thin and sharp, like glass breaking. In the distance, a bolter roars. It's a deep, grinding thunder that shakes the walls, the ground, and your bones. When Chaos Marines open fire, you don't just hear it, you feel it in your chest. You're caught between forces now. Loyalists have entered the ruins. Their arrival should bring hope, but it doesn't, because the Chaos Marines are still here, and they don't care who dies so long as you remain the prize. Lore masters still debate whether Chaos Marines hunt individuals for ritual reasons or simple cruelty. But one thing is certain. Once you're marked, you stay marked. Even when Loyalist squads intervene, the Chaos Marines won't give you up. The firefight bursts round you. Bolters slam into cover, exploding in bursts of shrapnel. Lost fire cuts through the air. Then lines of light snapping across the dark. The room flashes again and again. Shadows dancing in the chaos. You press yourself flat against the ground. Covering your head, you sneak a glance. And what you see should calm you, but doesn't. Loyalist starts, clad in ceramite, moving with precision. Their voices come through voxlinks. But they're not here for you. They're here for the war. To them, you're just background. Collateral if it comes to it. One of them gestures sharply. A missile launcher swings up. The rocket launches, streaking across the space. For a moment, silence. Then a Chaos Marine steps into view. He doesn't dive for cover. He doesn't even flinch. The rocket slams into his chest and detonates. Smoke, flame, rubble. You think it's over. But then he walks out, armor cracked but body unbroken. His helmet turns toward you, glowing eyes locking on. The missile didn't matter. You mattered. Historians still argue whether the mutations and gifts of chaos make them tougher than their loyalist kin, or if it's sheer willpower twisted by the warp. Looking at the Marine brush aside burning debris, you think it's both, and neither answer makes survival. More likely, you crawl along the floor, searching for cover that won't collapse. A guardsman lies nearby, helmet gone, face pale and bloodied. His eyes dart toward you. He whispers one word before. The light leaves them. Run. You do, The crossfire follows. Lost bolts slice past you, close enough to singe your skin. A bolt around explodes against the wall to your left, spraying shards of stone. Into your arm. You hiss, but keep moving. Through it all, the laughter continues. Chaos Marines don't fight in silence. They taunt. They chant. They scream oaths to gods you dare not name. Every cry rattles you deeper than the gunfire. Trivia time. There are accounts from the Horus heresy describing Chaos Marines laughing mid-battle, even while being shot apart, because to them pain was nothing compared to the thrill of the hunt. The more you hear now, the more you believe it. You dive into a collapsed passage, lungs burning, the ceiling groans, dust falling in clouds. Behind you, the fighting grows louder. You can't tell who's winning. Maybe no one is, but it doesn't matter. Both sides are titans. You're just the prey stuck between them. A loyalist's voice booms. Nearby, ordering civilians to evacuate for a heartbeat. You think you might be saved. You step forward, raising your hands, shouting for help. But then a bolt round hits him square in the chest, and his body disintegrates into gore. The Chaos Marine who fired steps out of the smoke, chains dangling from his armor. You scramble back. He doesn't follow. He just watches. Watching is worse. It means he has time. It means you're still the game, not the kill. You retreat deeper into the ruins, teeth clenched, ears ringing. You've seen both sides now, angels and devils, but in their shadow. You realize the truth. Neither side truly fights for you. You are a footnote, a pawn, and yet, to the Chaos Marines, you are also the entertainment. And in this crossfire, survival feels less like hope and more like chance. You thought the Chaos Marines themselves were enough to end you, but then you hear the growls. Not mechanical, not human. Low, wet sounds that ripple through the air like chains dragged across stone. At first you tell yourself it's nothing. Just echoes, the ruins make every noise stranger. But the sound grows sharper, claws scraping against walls, panting that fills the silence between bolter shots. That's when you realize the hunters have unleashed something else. Lore masters still debate whether Chaos Marines breed their own beasts or simply bind warp spawn into flesh. Some argue they take feral predators from conquered worlds and twist them until their forms barely hold together. Others believe demons themselves are chained into bone and muscle to serve as hunting dogs. Either way, you are now the quarry of more than Marines. The first hound you see isn't whole in any natural sense. It slinks from the shadows, its body stretched, skin torn in places where warp-light bleeds through. Its head splits in two, jaws wide, teeth jagged like rusted blades. It doesn't bark, it laughs, a broken echo of its masters. You freeze, pressing yourself flat against a broken pillar. Your lungs ache from holding your breath. The creature sniffs the air, movements jerky but purposeful. You smell it too, rot, copper, something like burned plastic. Trivia. Records from the Black Crusades mention warp hounds loosed in the underhives, beasts that could track a soul by its fear alone. No wall stopped them, no silence fooled them. People whispered that if you could hear your own heartbeat, so could they. The hound pauses, head twisting unnaturally as it tilts toward you. Your chest tightens. You will yourself to silence for a heartbeat. It works. Then a pebble shifts under your boot. The beast lunges. You sprint, the ruins echoing with its claws clattering behind you. Its laugh choked. Growl cuts through your spine. You duck under rubble, leap over shattered tiles, scrape your arms raw against jagged stone. Every second, it gains ground. A bolt around explodes nearby, showering sparks and dust. The hound shrieks not in pain, but in joy, and turns back the way it came. You don't celebrate. You know why. The Marines are calling it back. They don't want the kill yet. Historians still argue whether these hounds are truly under control or if the Marines simply trust the chaos to align with their will. But when you hear the clinking of chains in the distance thick, heavy chains pulled tight, you understand one thing. The beasts are theirs as much as you are. You stumble into another chamber, chest heaving. The walls here are lined with claw marks, deep grooves that cut into the stone. Dried blood streaks the floor, dragged into long marks. Whatever was here before you didn't escape. You whisper a prayer again, more instinct than belief. It feels hollow, but words are all you have. Then, laughter again, the hounds and the Marines together, overlapping, a chorus of mockery. Air warps suddenly, heavy and sharp, as if the world itself bends from the sound. His second hound crawls into view, this one smaller but faster, its eyes glowing like coals. Its tongue splits in three, each lapping the air hungrily. You stagger back, but it doesn't rush. It waits. You realize they're teaching it to enjoy the hunt. You can't fight them. You can't outrun them. You can only keep moving, keep gasping, keep praying. And that's the cruelest part. The Marines don't just hunt with beasts. They make the beasts hunt like them, slow, deliberate, savoring the fear before the end. When the claws scrape closer, you understand the new rule of the game. It's no longer just Marines behind you. It's the whole warp on a leash. The world has no sunrise now, no natural rhythm. Time dissolves in the ruins as you stumble from corridor to chamber to collapsed stairwell. Every breath feels like your last. But no end comes, only darkness stretching on and on. You've lost count of how many hours or days you've been running. Fatigue turns your legs into stone. Your mind plays tricks. You think you hear water dripping, but it's only blood somewhere above. You think you see a path out, but it leads back to where you began. Lore masters still debate whether Chaos Marines manipulate time when they hunt. Some claim the warp bleeds into reality, stretching moments, bending hours into endless loops. Others argue it's simply the effect of terror, warping memory until night feels eternal. Either way, you live inside a night without end. You try to sleep once. You wedge yourself into a corner, behind broken statues, clutching a shard of stone like a knife. Your eyes close. Seconds later, or maybe hours, you jolt awake. Not because of sound, but because of silence. The kind of silence that means they're near. Your body refuses rest now. Each step you take burns, but stopping burns more. Paranoia seeps in. Every creak of rubble, every whisper of air, becomes their approach. You swear you see glowing eyes in every shadow. Historians still argue whether mortals hunted by Chaos Marines often break from exhaustion before they're ever caught. Some records say victims throw themselves into open fire, preferring a quick death to the endless chase. Looking at your trembling hands, you start to understand why. The ruins themselves feel alive. Walls shift when you turn away. Corridors repeat, as if mocking your memory. Once, you swear you walked past the same corpse 3 times, only each time it was ranged differently. First face down, then face up, then sitting against the wall, its head tilted toward you. You whisper to yourself now. Not prayers, just words, your name, your home, fragments of old songs, anything to anchor you. The words sound foreign in your own voice, cracked and dry. Trivia. In the archives of Cadia, there's mention of civilians trapped during the 13th Black Crusade who survived for days in collapsed bunkers, only to be found speaking in nonsense tongues when rescued. Scholars debate whether it was warp corruption or sheer exhaustion. You feel closer to that madness with each step. Your stomach knots. Hunger bites hard, sharper than fear for the first time. You scavenge scraps from the dead half-a ration bar soaked in blood. Water pooled in a helmet. It tastes of rust. But you drink. You have no choice, and still, the Marines do not strike. They keep their distance. Sometimes you hear them above, boots grinding against stone. Sometimes you see their shadows cast, huge and monstrous across cracked walls. But they never close in. They wait. They always wait. The hounds return once, circling you just out of reach, their eyes glowing in the dark. One lunges, jaw snapping centimeters from your arm, then pulls back, training you. Maybe testing you. You can't decide which is worse. You press forward, legs shaking, eyes gritty. The air grows colder. You think it's night. But maybe it's always been night. The line between waking and dreaming blurs, and that's when the paranoia blooms full. You start to wonder if you've already been caught. If this endless night is their prison, if you're already in their grasp and the running is just another layer of torment, you laugh once short, cracked, half sob, half joke. Maybe this is what death feels like. The ruins don't answer, but you swear you hear the Marines laugh with you, deep and mechanical, echoing through the stone. Lore masters still debate whether Chaos Marines hunt to kill or hunt to keep, whether some prey are never slain at all, but left wandering in endless fear until their minds collapse. Tonight, in the dark, you think you know the truth, because no matter how far you run, the night never ends. You don't remember when hope first crept in again. Maybe it was the silence that lasted longer than usual. Maybe it was the corridor that opened into open air, showing a stretch of broken sky instead of endless stone. Whatever the reason, you start to believe you've shaken them, the ruins thin out. You find yourself in what was once a plaza. Cracked tiles forming patterns you almost recognize. A fountain lies shattered in the center. Water long dried. Only weeds growing through the rubble. For the first time since the hunt began. You don't hear boots. No laughter. No hounds. Only wind. Lore masters still debate whether Chaos Marines intentionally allow prey these moments of respite, or if it's simply a gap in their focus. Some argue it's strategy. Hope makes the eventual despair sharper. Others claim it's ritual, part of feeding the warp. You don't care which is true. For now, silence feels like survival. You collapse against the base of the fountain, chest heaving. Your legs shake too much to stand. You dare to close your eyes. Just for a moment, the warmth of memory seeps in streets filled with people. Not ruins, laughter not from monsters, but from children. You almost smile. That's when you see it. A mark scratched into the fountain stone. Not an old carving. Not weathered, fresh. Deep gouged in the shape of runes you don't recognize. Lines intersecting like claws. Your throat tightens. You've seen their work before. Historians still argue whether chaos runes are meant to be read or felt. Some believe they're words of power, binding mortals to despair. Others insist they're only symbols, meaningless but terrifying by association. You don't linger long enough to decide. You stagger to your feet, heart racing again. You move on, across the plaza, through broken archways. Every corner feels too quiet, too open. Yet nothing happens. No ambush, no gunfire. Only the wind again. Hope grows. Maybe you did lose them. Maybe they're fighting elsewhere, pulled away by loyalist forces. You cling to that thought, feeding it, letting it pull your feet forward. Trivia: during the heresy, there are reports of mortals escaping chaos warbands by accident, slipping into shadows. Forgotten in the larger conflict, stories of survivors always circulate, though most end with the same refrain: "They found me again later." You try to forget that part. The ruins give way to forest, trees twisted, leaves blackened, but still forest. The smell of sap cuts. Through the stench of smoke and blood, the ground is soft under your boots. The sound of birds, faint and thin, brushes your ears. For the first time, You breathe without choking. You walk deeper, moving faster now. The trees thickening round you, the light grows dim. But that feels natural here, not oppressive. Your heart slows. For a brief hour or maybe less you almost believe you'll live. And then you trip. A wire, then, taut, hidden among the roots. You fall hard, palms scraping dirt. The forest shudders as a sound rises, chains rattling. Distant at first, then all round. You look up, and your stomach drops. Every tree bears a mark, fresh runes carved into bark, some still oozing sap like blood. The birds fall silent, the air grows heavy. You turn, and there he stands, a chaos marine, motionless, half hidden by shadow, his armor scarred, runes glowing faintly along the plates. His helmet tilts, and you realize something terrible. He never lost you. He's been here the whole time, watching. Lore masters still debate whether these hunts are random or chosen, whether mortals stumble into the wrong path, or if chaos marks them long before. Standing frozen under his gaze, you think the debate doesn't matter. What matters is that false hope was never yours. It was theirs, a gift, meant to ripen into despair. The marine raises a hand, chains clinking, no words, no charge, just a gesture, as if to say, keep running, we're not finished. And so you do. The running never really stops now. Each step is heavier, each breath thinner. But you force yourself onward. Behind you, silence, not pursuit, not laughter, just the void of waiting. That's worse. You know he could end this whenever he wanted. The fact he doesn't is the torment. Then the whispers begin. At first, you think it's the forest groaning, wind through broken boughs. But no, these sounds curl inside your skull. They speak in voices that are not voices, familiar yet warped. Like echoes of loved ones drowned beneath water. They tell you things you want to believe. Stop running. You've earned rest. They tell you things you fear. You will fall, like all before you. And worst of all, they tell you the truth you've denied. They own you already. Scholars of the Ordo Malleus claim these whispers are not words at all, but psychic impressions. Carried through the warp, Chaos Marines, bound to their dark patrons, can project temptation like a weapon. Some theorists compare it to a net, subtle strands pulling prey tighter, each thoughter. Not. You stumble as the forest tilts, shapes twist in the shadows, a friend's face, a brother's hand, a lover's smile. All distorted, eyes glowing faintly with warp fire. They beckon, promising shelter if you yield. Your ears ring with half-remembered sermons. The Emperor protects, the Emperor shields. But those words feel paper-thin now. When a whisper says the Emperor abandoned, you flinch not because you agree, but because you're not sure you don't. Historians still argue whether mortals ever resist such voices needed. Some stories tell of saints who spat defiance into the dark and lived. Others tell of men who prayed until the end, only for chaos to twist their prayers into screams. There are no clear rules, only outcomes. The trees thin, and a clearing opens. In its center, a monolith juts from the earth, jagged, pulsing faintly like a heart. The whispers grow louder here, no longer subtle. They roar with overlapping promises: immortality, power, freedom from fear. Each word grates your bones. You drop to your knees, clutching your head. Blood drips from your nose. You don't know if it's real or a trick. You don't care. That's when you hear another voice, different, calm, steady. It says nothing of power, nothing of escape, only one phrase, over and over: stand. Lore masters would debate endlessly whether such moments are divine intervention or mere fragments of a breaking mind. You don't argue. You drag yourself upright, swaying, staring at the monolith. The whispers laugh. They taunt. They promise ease if you kneel. Instead, You spit blood at the stone. The laughter cuts off. Silence swallows the clearing. For a heartbeat. You think you've won. And then the forest parts. The Chaos Marine steps into view. Runes on his armor blazing brighter than before. His helm tilts again. But now you understand the gesture. This is no game. This is the choice. Do you break here? In front of him? Do you accept the whispers, or do you stand? Even if it means being torn apart. Trivia. In the archives of Cadia, records tell of hunters who offered prey this moment. Some broke, some fought, all died. Yet the Imperium preserved their names anyway, etched into walls of remembrance. Why? Because in that one moment, the hunted chose defiance. You grip a stone shard from the ground, handshaking. You know it won't matter, but you raise it anyway. The Marine doesn't speak, doesn't move, only watches, and in his silence, the whispers crawl back, hungrier, crueler, whispering the simplest truth of all. There is no escape. The stone shard feels like nothing in your hand. Its edge is blunt, its weight uneven, but it is all you have. Across the clearing, the Chaos Space Marine towers over. You, still and silent, as if daring you to make the first move. His armor gleams in the faint war plight, each rune etched with care. Each spike a reminder that he is more than a soldier, he is a predator sculpted by gods. You charge anyway. The sound you make is not brave. It is the raw noise of desperation, a rasp torn from a throat gone dry. The shah meets ceramite with a dull clack. No scratch, not even a mark. The Marine doesn't flinch. His head tilts again. That same infuriating gesture. He lets you strike him, as though your attack is beneath notice. Lore masters still debate whether Chaos Marines allow these moments to study resistance or to savor the taste of broken will. Some suggest it is ritual, a reenactment of their own fall, watching mortals stumble just as they once did. Others argue it is simpler, cruelty for cruelty's sake. You don't need a theory. You only feel the weight of futility in your arm. He moves at last. One gauntleted hand rises, faster than such a bulk should allow, and knocks the shard from your grip. The stone flies into the dark. Your hand throbs. Then his other hand rises, pointing toward you. The whispers surge again, louder than ever, pressing against your skull. They don't offer rest now. They demand it. Kneel. Submit, call out, and you will live. You stagger, half ready to drop. Then the memory of the clearing hits you. Blood. Bodies, the first kill you saw when this began. Living is not what they offer. It's existing as something else, something unrecognizable. You spit again, though your throat burns. Your voice cracks out. No, for the first time. He reacts. A low chuckle, vox distorted, echoing through the trees. He steps forward. Each impact of his boots rattles your chest. He is not rushing. He knows you have nowhere left to go. Historians still argue whether the final stand matters in the eyes of the Emperor. Some say every act of defiance, no matter how small, strengthens his light. Others say it changes nothing. The Marine still kills you. Chaos still feeds, and your resistance is swallowed by the void. But the debate misses one point. In that moment, you stand for yourself. Your vision blurs as exhaustion crushes through. The clearing spins. You feel heat on your skin, as though the monolith itself flares brighter with every step he takes. The air smells of ozone and ash. Then bolter fire. Not at you, past you. Into the trees, the Marine halts, turning his helm. More shots follow, closer now, disciplined, controlled. A voice shouts litanies in High Gothic. Loyalists, for a flicker of time, hope returns. You drop to your knees, laughing weakly, until you realize what this means. You are no longer just prey. You are bait, The Marine raises his weapon. The clearing erupts in thunder as rounds scream through the dark. You curl into the dirt, hands over your head, the ground kicking beneath you as shells detonate. Trivia: during the Horus Heresy, records mention prey deliberately released by traitor Marines to draw loyalist forces into traps. The tactic became known as the Bleeding Trail. Some victims realized too late they had been spared, only to guide others into slaughter. The battle rages above you. Lost fire cuts red streaks through the trees. Bolters answer. Grenades crack. You can't tell who wins. You only know that chaos doesn't care if you live or die, so long as you serve the spectacle. You crawl toward the tree line, each limb trembling, ears ringing. Behind you, the Marine laughs again, not cruel this time, but amused, as though entertained by how little it all means. And still the whispers don't stop. They remind you, loyalists can fall too, just as easily. The Imperium may save you today, but chaos waits forever. You keep crawling, because for now, that is all you can do. The fight tears through the clearing like a storm. You crawl, dragging your body toward the tree line, but you can't help looking back. The Loyalist scouts by their lighter armor move with sharp precision, darting between roots and rubble. They fire disciplined bursts, every muzzle flash punching holes into the dark. The Chaos Marine barely moves. He absorbs their fire, his armor sparking with each impact. When he does act, it's devastating. One bolter shot sends a scout spinning backward, half his chest gone. Another is crushed when the Marine simply steps forward and swats him aside with a gauntlet. The Loyalists shout orders, but you notice something odd. They're not here for you, they're here for him. To them, you're irrelevant, just debris caught in the crossfire. Lore masters still debate whether Chaos Marines retain fragments of who they once were, phases or names buried beneath corruption. Some evidence suggests they do. Corrupted features resembling old statues, or voices that occasionally slip into their former tongue. Others argue they are wholly remade, their past devoured by the gods they serve. Either way, when the Marine's helm shifts toward you again, you feel the weight of both theories pressing down, and then his mask breaks, not literally, but the void. The Loyalists manage to stagger him. A plasma bolt tears across his pauldron. Melting through runes, the Marine roars, a sound that rattles the trees. His helm cracks where the heat licked it. For the first time, you see beneath not a face, but something half-transformed, flesh-twisted, eye glowing faintly within a fire, teeth too long for any human mouth. The sight roots you. Whatever he was, he is not that anymore. Chaos has eaten him, reshaped him. He is a vessel of corruption, walking proof that what hunts you is not a man in armor, but a god's cruelty given muscle. Historians still argue whether these transformations are blessings or punishments. Some Chaos Marines boast of mutations as marks of favor. Others scream as their bodies warp uncontrollably, victims of gifts they never asked for. The truth lies in both. Favor and curse blur into the same agony. The Loyalists press harder. One charges, chainsword roaring, and actually carves a shadow. Groove across the Marine's thigh. For a second, you think the giant might fall. Instead, he grips the scout mid-swing, lifts him, and smashes him into the monolith. The warp stone pulses, and the scout is gone, consumed in light. No scream left behind. You scramble farther, bile rising in your throat. The Marine turns back, his cracked helm split wide, one glowing eye fixed on you. The Loyalists shout, trying to drag his attention back, but you feel it. He wants you to see him, to know what waits if you ever break. Trivia: during the Great Crusade, some records note Imperial soldiers who survived battles against the earliest traitor Astartes. They described the enemy not as warriors, but as parodies of men, faces twisted into shapes meant to mock humanity itself. Those accounts were suppressed, rewritten as exaggerations of war. But they weren't exaggerations. They were warnings. The Marine takes one more step forward, and then he stops. He doesn't strike. He doesn't fire. He only points at you with one ruined finger. The gesture is simple, yet heavier than any weapon. A promise, a mark. You are his, whether now or later. Then the Loyalists unleash a barrage of grenades. The clearing erupts, fire rolling in waves, branches collapsing in flame. The shockwave slams into you, tossing you deeper into the trees. You don't know if the Marine falls. You don't know if the Loyalists survive. You only know the mark remains, etched into your soul as clearly as if carved there. When you blink through the smoke and ash, the clearing is gone, silent. Nothing stirs, not the Loyalists, not the Marine, not even the whispers, but you feel them lingering, beneath your skin, waiting. You crawl farther into the forest, heart hammering, realizing the cruelest truth yet. The hunt isn't about killing you. It's about breaking you, and the mask, once shown, can never be unseen. The forest no longer feels like shelter. Every branch overhead twists into a claw. Every shadow hides an echo of that glowing eye. You stumble onward, legs barely obeying. The silence is wrong. To complete, even the air seems to hesitate, as though waiting for something inevitable. You find a stream and collapse at its edge, dipping cracked lips into the water. It tastes of rust and soil. Your reflection stares back, hollow eyes, dirt-caked skin, a smear of blood down your cheek. You almost don't recognize yourself. That's when it strikes you maybe, that's the point. The Chaos Marine didn't need to kill you. He only needed to change how you see yourself. Lore masters still debate whether prey marked by chaos can ever be cleansed. Some claim that taint lingers until death. Others argue that the Emperor's light can burn away any shadow if faith holds. You're not sure you believe either. The mark feels like a weight in your bones, and prayer only muffles it, never erases it. Your mind wanders if you die here, in this nameless ruin. Who will know? Will the Imperium even notice? Or will your bones lie forgotten? Another tally in a war too vast to count. Historians still argue about numbers, billions lost. Billions more conscripted, but none of them have ever been the one hunted. None of them know what it feels like to be singled out. The stream ripples, not from wind, from steps. You rise too late. The Marine is there, smoke clinging to his armor. His helm is shattered now, revealing more of the corruption beneath. His jaw is a ruin of teeth and scar tissue, his eye burning steadily. Yet he doesn't charge. He just watches you, as if the chase itself is done. You back away, feet sinking in mud, until the stream swallows your calves. Nowhere left to go. You grip a broken branch, trembling, absurd against his mass. He lowers his bolter, raises one hand, open-palmed, an invitation, not a strike. The whispers return, subtle this time, coaxing. They speak of survival, of freedom, of strength. All you must do is accept. You think of the first bodies, the symbols desecrated, the Loyalists crushed. You think of the eye staring at you through smoke, and you realize that, whether you kneel or not, this ends the same, death or corruption. Both erase you, trivia, in scattered accounts of chaos hunts. Some victims were never found. The Imperium recorded them as dead, but rumors whispered otherwise, that they were taken, reshaped into cultists, even gifted new flesh by the warp. No proof remains, only stories. The Marine waits. The silence stretches. For a heartbeat, you consider kneeling. Anything to stop running. Anything to stop being prey. Instead, you raise the branch, weak, shaking, laugh up. Lie futile, but it's a pride, a refusal. The Marine tilts his head one final time. He steps forward. The branch snaps in your grip. His shadow covers you completely, and then nothing. The record ends there, doesn't it? That's all anyone can say. Death, capture, corruption, it doesn't matter. What matters is that you stood until the end. That when the choice came, you did not kneel, and so the wheel of fate turns again. Sacrifice has been made. The first key has turned, and mankind takes one step closer to the light of the throne. This is not the end. This is only the beginning. Now the pacing slows. The words soften. You can breathe again. The chase is over. At least in story. Whatever lingers in your chest, let it fade with the smoke of burning trees. You are safe here, far from bolter fire, far from whispers that promise too much. Close your eyes. If you wish, the forest quiets, the marine is gone. The shadows hold nothing more than the usual dark. Let your body grow heavy. Let the sound of imagined boots retreat, step by step, until they dissolve into nothing. The mark he left may ache, but pain pauses.